it's Karen Burniston here with my monthly Designer Challenge video. The theme this month is to use one of our several motion pop-up dies. So I chose the Pop and Swap, and the technique in this video is to actually stack two of them so that you can get double the action. I'll be decorating my stacked Pop and Swap with two brand new dies from our August release, Hello and Tiny Gnomes. These will be available on our website starting August 9th. The structure of my card is made with two pieces of cardstock. The main panel is 5 inches by 6 inches. And then for the smaller panel, I went with a piece 6 inch wide, 3 1/4 inch tall, and scored it at 1 inch from the end to make a flap. Then I'm going to add my LINECO neutral pH adhesive in my fine tip bottle. That's my very favorite adhesive for the pop-ups. And then I'm just going to center and put that flap behind the panel. Okay, so here's my finished card structure. I just went stash diving for a pretty piece of floral paper. This one's from Echo Park, and I just cut those paper panels to be a little bit smaller than the card panels. I actually prefer a lighter weight when I'm cutting the Pop and Swap mechanism, and so I'm choosing a double-sided pattern paper. I will cut one from the front of the paper and on the other one from the back of the paper. And the reason I cut the second one out of the back of the paper is so that when I flip it over, it's the same color as my first one, but reversed. Okay, so when training the Pop and Swap, I think it's easiest to start with the 4 vertical folds that basically make the pop-up box. So I'm just going along and finding those 4 folds. And I can see them in the paper. They're a little bit light because of the lightweight paper, but I can see them and they have been scored. So then after I work all 4 of those vertical folds, then as I look at it from the side, I basically have the pop-up box structure of my Pop and Swap. Okay, pushing that vertical fold flat, that allows me to work the diagonals through both layers at once. And I like to work those back and forth a few times. Then I open to 90 degrees, push against the triangles so that they invert and fold into the piece, which takes the swing arm through and up the other side. Okay, so that swing arm is ready to go. Same thing down here. I fold the vertical so that I can hit the diagonals through both layers, folding back and forth a few times. I open to 90 degrees. I invert the triangles so that they fold inward. And then that is my regular Pop and Swap mechanism. And then each swing arm has an extra little fold that you can engage that will allow the swing arm to swing a little bit more parallel to the card. Okay, so for my other Pop and Swap, I'm actually going to fold it in the usual manner first. So I'm going to turn it over to the lighter side, the one that I cut into, because that's where I can see the folds. And I'm going to repeat exactly what I did on the other one to create the Pop and Swap in the usual manner. So that was just because it's easier to fold from the side that's been die cut. But remember, I want this one to be upside down. So now I have to reverse every fold. So I'm just going to do my verticals first, just like I was starting from scratch. The 4 verticals that create the pop-up box, ignoring the swing arms. And I've already trained the swing arm, so I should be able to just push against the triangle and bring that in. Remember, it's those diagonals that you fold back and forth, and then you push the triangles, the swing arm goes through to the other side. So now I have the Pop and Swap, but it's basically reversed. Okay, so I put my first Pop and Swap into the card in the absolute usual manner, so nothing at all different than normal assembly on this. I put the adhesive on those 2 base panels and get them right over the top of the fold and then press them down really well. And that's really the reason that I like a lighter weight paper or cardstock for this mechanism, because I am gluing to both sides of the fold, so it kind of gets stacked up and bulky in there if you use a heavier cardstock. Okay, making sure that that is adhered really well, then I can work on the other side. I need to push against the second fold so that the swing arm is up and I can see the tapered tab plus the panel to the left of it. And then the adhesive goes on the tapered tab. And then I keep the left side of the card nice and flat while I carefully close the right side of the card into the exposed adhesive. And this is the part where it's going to try and pull it up the first time you open it. So if you just reach in there with your finger and make sure that the tab is attached really well. Now I've got the Pop and Swap working. And this was when I realized that when I cut the brown cardstock, I had actually cut it with the portion that had the UPC strip on it still attached. So no biggie, I'll just add another piece of brown cardstock to the back of the card. That will both cover up the UPC strip, but then it'll also cover up the tab from where I attached the front of the card. Okay, carrying on with my usual assembly, I add adhesive all over the top of the pop and swap mechanism and add the large rectangle that comes in the set. So nothing different yet than usual pop and swap assembly. Okay, so now I'm going to stack the second pop and swap on top of the first one. So I add the adhesive like I normally would in those two sections that straddle the fold. But in this case, the fold that this pop and swap is going to be built on is actually the seam between the top of the rectangle and the left side of the card. So that's basically a new fold that is created by the first pop-up. And then I can build a new pop-up in that fold. Now before I add the other half of that upper pop and swap, I'm going to add another one of the large rectangles, just lining it up with the edge of the pop-up that I've installed so that it sticks out a little bit further to the right. By lengthening that rectangle a little bit with that second one, then I'll get a cool stair-step effect when I open the card. Okay, for attaching the tapered tab, it's the same as usual. Make sure that I can see the tapered tab and the panel next to it. The swing arm in this case is going to be down because it's reversed. And then I'm going to carefully close the card against the exposed adhesive. And then I just go real slow as I open it, make sure that I can give a good press against that tapered tab and that it's adhered really well. Okay, so now I have stacked opposite pop and swaps. And then the upper pop and swap is going to get the glue all over the upper part of the mechanism, just like normal. And then I'm going to add my large rectangle to the top, just like normal. So it's very generic. You could certainly use this technique and decorate it for any theme. I'm going to use some of the decorator pieces that come included in the pop and swap for the inside upper decoration. So there's a scalloped rectangle, but I nested in the larger of the two smaller rectangles so that it would be a frame. Then I add the smaller of the two rectangles inside the frame, and then I have basically the blue shining through between the two pieces. Then I add the script Love You that comes included in the pop and swap die set and the smaller of the two hearts. Okay, switching to the tiny gnomes. So this new die set will be available on our website starting next week. There is a stamp feature for the beard, mustache, and the braids. So those are stamping dies. You add some ink to the die. As you run it through to cut, it will also stamp the detail. So my first tiny gnome is going to go on that little step out that I created by adding that second rectangle. Then for the tiny gnomes that I'm going to add to the swing arms, I'm going to first place each one on the smaller rectangle from the pop and swap set. Now because there are so many moving parts to this card and so many layers to the tiny gnomes, I was a little worried about catch points. As that thing slides in, a beard or a mustache or a nose could catch against an edge. So what I decided to do was to put each of my gnomes under glass, so to speak, by just cutting, using the same die, a transparency piece to go over the top. I'm just using mini glue dots in the four corners to attach the transparency to the rectangle. Okay, with the card closed, I have access to that lower swing arm that's visible when the card is closed, so I add adhesive to it, and then I'm just going to slide in my gnome rectangle until he stays within the limits of the card, and he's peeking out upside down. And then as I open it, he's going to go in. Now I'm noticing right away that that swing arm, since I cut it out of paper, doesn't like all that weight, and so I'm going to have to add a little stiffener to that swing arm. Now this is only needed because I used paper for my mechanism, so it's just a little lightweight for that swing arm. And all I'm going to do is just take a piece of cardstock. I just rough cut it with my scissors. It's never going to be visible. I just need to strengthen up that swing arm. Okay, so now let's look at the difference. Just adding that piece of cardstock and I've got no more issues. It swings in wonderfully as the card opens and closes. Okay, then I'm going to add a gnome to the other swing arm. Now that one, it doesn't really matter the weight of the gnome, whether that's a lot for the swing arm, because it's against the card, so it won't come down and, catch against another layer. Okay, moving to the upper swing arms. With the card closed, I have access to the one that's going to be visible when the card is closed. I'm going to add a gnome to that one, making sure it stays in the card and that it's not so tall that it can't duck behind the pop-up when it's open. Now I was noticing as I opened it that if I opened it far enough, I would expose the corner of this gnome, which would then sometimes catch against the layer. So I added a decorative flower in the corner And then just to make it look intentional, I added a decorative flower to the upper one as well. But that really was just to avoid a catch point. And then the final gnome on the last swing arm. There's something about the pop and swap that just makes you want to open and close the card a bunch of times. And if you stack it up double high, it's even more fun to open and close it. Okay, to finish out the front of the card, I added the same panel of pattern paper and then a scalloped rectangle made from pieces from the pop and swap, and then the new Hello script die that does have an optional stencil feature to add the stitch marks, and then one more tiny gnome, this one on pop dots. For the inside of the card, I just created a border by cutting down the scalloped rectangle from the pop and swap and then just adding a strip of brown cardstock over the edge. I also added a few little mini hearts to the gnome up at the top, and then just created a place to write my personal greeting. And you can definitely see how generic this technique is by just doubling up the pop and swap. You really could put anything on those swing arms, and I really invite you to give it a try. It's a fun technique. My finished card measures 5 inches by 6 inches, so that means it'll fit in an A7 envelope. It folds pretty flat, but it's also pretty rigid, so my guess is it's going to need that extra ounce stamp on it, even though it is a standard size card. Check the description box below this YouTube video for supply links. Now the pop and swap is available now, but the tiny gnomes and the hello are not available until August the 9th on our website. You can also go to the blog post. On the blog post, you will find more photos and description of this card, as well as links to the great cards made by our talented design team. Thanks for watching. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBurniston.com, where you can find out information about purchasing these dies, as well as links to all my other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.